Future.figucarolina.org English translation. 644th contact Sunday, the 14th of February 2016, 13:24 hours.
You are already waiting. Greetings and welcome, Ptaa, my friend.
I also greet you, Edouard, dear friend, but I see in your eyes that...
Yes, you are right.
You know what I was going to say.
Of course, because I can't just cover my eyes so you can read it. It's not possible to hide what moves me. It's always the same, and it can't be changed, because it hits every time. But it's easier if you don't know anything in advance.
That is why we decided together not to fathom such irreversible events through foresight anymore, and consequently I had no knowledge that Silvano's life ended on the 8th of February. First Enjana and then Florina told me about this on the day of his death. But just as you are, I must also judge my own condition, and not only with you, but also with me. Events of this kind repeatedly evoke the same impulses. This makes no difference between Earth humans and us Pleiadian, for such impulses are common to all normal people. Unless they are psychopathic, thoughtless, senseless, and self-referral egoistic creatures who are delusional and believe that they would stand above everything.
Yes, I know they are just those who live in the delusion that after them, if they have to leave the world, the universe would therefore perish and dissolve. But it is pointless to talk about it. For such creatures, as you call them, are autocratic, self-opinionated, unreasonable, and believe themselves to be insanely omnipotent or absolute, omnipotent, unrestricted, and omnipotent, which they do not realize in their delusion.
That's how it actually is. But I would like to mention that Florina and Enjana observed the burial, recorded the profound necrology, and transmitted it to me. In addition, I would like to bring up something that would seem astonishing and macabre to some people on Earth if I were to say it openly, but which happens often with us, albeit not every day. It's about that.
I know this from your father Svath, and indeed my cousin Max Bachmann and I dealt with it in the late 1940s. So I think, if I think about it correctly, that it will certainly be good if...
Then there shouldn't be anything wrong with that.
I think so. But then something else. You said on your last visit that you had something to discuss or say on your next visit, but you didn't want to do it on the 3rd of February.
That's right, and it's about which should not be official and therefore not be made public. In the last days, there were still some factors to be clarified, why I didn't want to talk about it during my last visit, but only today. It really wouldn't be good if humanity on Earth were to hear about it before it is ready. So the following has to be explained.
This is unpleasant news, so now I also understand that nothing should become public about it. Then we do not have to talk about it any further. So I want to talk about something that Simyase, Quetzal, and you have already explained to me, and I remember that your father Svath explained the same to me as you did. I am referring here to our private conversations, which have referred to the fact that in pregnant women cesarean sections should only be carried out if this is required by the effective need. Also, on the 11th of October 1989, Quetzal and I talked about it briefly, because in the Pulstip there was the following article in which some of what you taught me was written.
Clear and Contact Reports, 230th Contact Report, from the 11th of October, 1989, Volume 6, page 112.
I was asked how dangerous it actually was to give birth to children by cesarean section. I did not know the answer except that the operation often causes adhesions in the woman's abdomen.
Your answer was correct, but cesarean sections also increase the rate of stillbirths. The procedure is also not harmless for the woman, because damage to the uterus can also occur.
Aha, so not harmless, as they always say. In addition to what is written in this article, there have been many explanations regarding the fact that newborns are very much at risk when they are brought into the world by cesarean section. This damage comes about because the offspring, as you, your father Svath, Your daughter Simyase and also Quetzal, and you have expressly declared, are born sterile from bacteria, and instead of being infested with the immune-strengthening vaginal bacteria of the mother by the environmental bacteria, which weaken the immune system. Since we have only ever talked privately about these interesting things, it would be good if you would say something official, especially now that this article was published here on February 6th in the Tagesanzeiger. Unfortunately, it is, as the newspaper and journal articles etc. are always banal and not written in sufficient detail, so that really everything necessary could be understood also by laymen. Look here, this article is it.
I would like to say something official about it. Infants actually have a higher risk of infection after a cesarean section, as can the risk of organic birth defects. The bacteria of the mother help the infant during and after birth for a strong immune system. Already in the placenta, which is not completely sterile, there is a microbiome or a community of bacteria, which is similar to that in the mouth and is responsible for the birth process to begin and the birth itself to take place at the right time. Laypersons usually mistakenly perceive all bacteria as threatening and dangerous. On the one hand, this is true for many, but on the other hand, very many are also vital for human beings. According to our findings, every healthy person carries more than 140 trillion bacteria around with them, more than 12 times as many as the human body has cells. The human body's own bacteria account for about 4% of the body's weight, whereby this percentage of bacteria is vital and without which humans could not live. The intestine alone contains around 99% of all bacteria and their communities, the microbiomes, which are important for digestive processes. The bacteria are also present everywhere else, so on and in the skin as well as in all organs, and thus also in the placenta. This is the most important organ in women, because without it no offspring could develop, because the placenta is the actual developmental and nutritional organ for the growing infant. She is not only the breadwinner of the growing fetus until birth, but she also protects it, not only physically but also with regard to certain harmful substances, which she does not let in from the mother's body if they appear in very small quantities. In this form, the placenta is not all-encompassingly protective, nor is it absolutely sterile, but it does protect the growing child from certain harmful substances, although the mother is responsible for keeping away from such substances because the placenta cannot completely repel all harmful substances. Particularly harmful substances are alcohol, drugs, toxins, and medicines. The correct and valuable bacteria are extremely important, both in the placenta for the growing fetus, but also with regard to the birth stimulation and the birth itself, because already in the placenta the growing fetus absorbs bacteria. These, however, are not identical with the bacteria with which she comes into contact during a normal birth in the mother's vagina, and which are vital for the infant and its health stability. The most important bacteria that a baby takes in at birth come from the birth canal. And if these bacteria are absent at birth as a result of a cesarean section, then this can lead to severe autoimmune diseases, which is not uncommon because the small young body lacks the handling of pathogens that are transmitted to the newborn child by the mother's vaginal bacteria at birth. Although a cesarean section is not necessarily a fatality for the offspring for the whole life, in one or the other case medium, severe to very severe health impairments can appear. So a newborn who is born with a cesarean section cannot absolutely be said to be doomed for the rest of his life. But health damage in various forms can appear more or less because the vaginal bacteria are missing. Several hundred different bacteria already exist in the placenta in communities that are most similar to those found in the mouth. And if these are bacteria communities associated with diseases which migrate from the mother's mouth into the placenta with the blood, then the body fruit is damaged health-wise. This also means that if the pregnant mother has sick or lazy teeth or gingivitis or inflamed gums or periodontitis or inflammation of the periodontal skin, her body fruit will be damaged, which can often lead to loss of consciousness, heart defects, or other heart complaints, but also to premature births. And there is no doubt that innumerable different bacteria from the mother's mouth get into the placenta and have a damaging effect on the body fruit. Optimum oral and dental hygiene is therefore the most urgent requirement for every pregnancy. However, this is not only recommended for women who are currently pregnant, but for all people in general, both male and female, because poor oral and dental hygiene, particularly damaged or even lazy teeth and penetrating bad breath, usually leads to severe heart disease, even to sudden death. It must also be said that among the bacteria in the placenta, there may also be pathogens that may originate from a previous pregnancy and an inflamed urinary tract, which can also lead to premature births. In general, however, it is clear that, except in an emergency, a normal birth is always preferable for the offspring, because the vaginal bacteria, which occupy the infant to be born, form the basis for a strong immune system because the mother's bacteria are the most important for the newborn. A baby born in a natural way is provided by its mother with large quantities of germs, which is necessary for it to enjoy the necessary health protection outdoors in the world. This must be the case naturally because all the healthy maternal germs and bacteria protect it from the harmful influences of the world. Cesarean section children, however, lack these maternal bacteria, which is why they are often sickly and suffer from allergies, asthma, or overweight more often than normal-born offspring, even in adulthood. It can also be explained that everything in the uterus itself is approximately sterile, but really only approximately, and that the first germs, mainly lactobacilli or lactic acid bacteria, are only transferred from the mother to the baby and its intestines during birth in the birth canal. And what is more, the skin bacteria as well as the germs from the near and far environment are added, whereby, however, the lactic acid bacteria protect against all too many harmful germs, while many others strengthen and train the immune system. If, however, a cesarean section is performed, other types of bacteria enter the infant's intestines along with other skin bacteria and germs from the surrounding area, often causing all kinds of health damage. In their first moments of life, babies who are brought into the world by a cesarean section often come into contact with the skin of other people, which means nothing other than that uncontrollable foreign influences arise, which cause unforeseeable changes of various forms, which can have an unfavorable effect for a long time, well into adulthood. The intestinal flora, which necessarily results from the specific germs of the mother during a normal birth, is also determined by a cesarean section, because this has to come together somehow from the outside due to the lack of maternal germs. In this way, bacteria or germs are collected through the skin, which then migrate into the intestines and build up a foreign bacterial culture, which can be both good and bad to very bad and even life-threatening. It can take many months until a really healthy intestinal flora has built up in this way, while poor intestinal flora development can quickly lead to health problems. This is the case when harmful bacteria become rampant and trigger allergic skin reactions, digestive problems, and colic, severe life-threatening or even life-threatening reactions. When a cesarean section is performed, the colonization of the intestine and the entire body by the maternal bacteria is violent and inevitably impossible. Although breastfeeding can slightly alter the balance between good and bad bacteria in a small way, it does not help to correct it to a large extent and therefore not completely. Breastfeeding is the only way, if considered at all, by women who, for some erroneous and confusing reasons, prefer a cesarean section to giving birth normally, to reduce the risk of gluten intolerance by shifting the good and bad bacteria. The reason for this is that breast milk contains antibodies that keep harmful germs in check in a certain way, which promotes the beneficial bacteria and allows them to settle within certain limits, such as bifidobacteria and lactobacilli. It is indisputable that if an infant can build up too few of these bifidobacteria in the intestine in the first year of life, as a result of its cesarean section in the world settlement, the probability of sooner or later becoming overweight is high. Of course, such damage can also occur in offspring if the intestinal flora is already disturbed in the mother. Consequently, she cannot supply her child with the necessary bacteria through breastfeeding. However, this problem can be counteracted if the mother takes probiotics during pregnancy. That is to say, a medical product made from very useful intestinal bacteria, such as lactic acid bacteria, which can be prescribed by a doctor or bought in pharmacies. In the whole procedure of intestinal flora formation, it must be expected that it will take about 3 to 4 years for the intestinal flora to develop. But it is important to know which bacteria settle in the intestine and whether they are useful or harmful germs. This depends on many factors, because small children push all sorts of things into their mouths, caress animals living with their mouths and suck on their mother's breast and all sorts of objects, etc., as well as on pacifiers, which often fall on the floor, etc. And all this is afflicted with bacteria or germs of all kinds and gets into the mouth of the child, and with it also into the entire digestive tract, and thus also into the intestine, whereby the intestinal repertory is built up. If the toddler sucks and cuddles on mother's breast frequently, then this is very advantageous, because it comes into contact with the breast microbes, which form a good protection factor for the child. Contact with mother's skin is also extremely important, because it also has a large bacterial flora, as is especially the case with the vaginal bacterial flora that is deposited on the baby during normal birth, which is vital for the baby. Consequently, it is of utmost importance that the infant's bacterial flora is influenced by the mother's bacterial flora as it passes through the birth canal. This strengthens the immune system and prevents health damage of many kinds, such as allergies and autoimmune diseases in particular, because early contact in the womb and during normal birth with certain bacterial species is important for the development of the immune system. In contrast, however, there is the birth of a cesarean section, which undoubtedly severely damages the immune system, although it must be borne in mind that this is usually the case, especially with unnecessary cesarean section procedures. In emergency procedures of this kind, other factors can come to the fore, which dampen the danger of a less functioning immune system and also help to build it up. If the mother of the newborn carries it as often as possible directly on the body by wrapping it around herself and thus transferring her germs to the body and into the mouth of the child every day for hours. However, in the cesarean section practice, the best for the immune system of the newborn can be done by inserting a piece of fine gauze or a sponge into the vagina about half an hour before the cesarean section and leaving it in place, so that the newborn can be rubbed into the whole body, that is to say, from head to toe, in order to transfer the mother's vaginal bacteria to the newborn. Specifically, the bacteria belonging to the group Lactobacillus and Bacteroides colonize the entire body of the newborn. The genus Bacteroides synonym Bacteroidacea is an obligate anaerobic, pleomorphic, gram-negative rod bacterium which belongs to the normal flora of the mucous membranes of the intestinal tract, that is to say, of the intestinal canal, that is to say, in a broader sense, to the digestive tract, that is to say, the entire area which is important for the digestion of food, such as the esophagus, stomach, intestine, and appendages. These microbes are extremely important for the beneficial development of the child's immune system. As has been mentioned several times, the naturally born baby takes over the bacteria from the mother, protecting it from harmful pathogens. In the case of a cesarean section, however, this protective mechanism does not work. Consequently, the offspring, which is born by cesarean section, is often affected by asthma or allergies and also has an increased risk of infection than children who are born naturally normally, as has already been mentioned. In the belly of the mother, the offspring doesn't grow up in an absolutely completely sterile environment, but absolutely protected from dangerous germs if it doesn't damage the fetus through alcohol, drugs, medications, or toxins. Then, again, it happens during natural birth in the birth canal that the offspring take over the bacteria from the mother through the vaginal germs. The bacterial flora that develops on the newborn's skin protects it from infections with other germs. In fact, a natural birth results in a large correspondence between the bacterial flora of mother and child. In a cesarean section, however, the infant's skin is predominantly colonized by other skin bacteria from the surrounding area, which inevitably include dangerous pathogens such as Staphylococcus aureus, as well as many common antibiotic-resistant germs that can cause skin infections and, in the worst case, life-threatening diseases such as pneumonia. The composition of the bacterial flora of the newborn's body is therefore determined by the mother and the circumstances of the birth, and thus also the susceptibility to allergies, asthma, infections and diseases, etc. Basically, the beneficial bacteria taken over from the mother are important for digestion, strengthen the immune system, and compete with pathogens. Consequently, they also act as protective factors. When a baby is born, the lungs fill with air for the first time and now supply the heart independently with oxygen. However, the skin of the newborn must from now on get used to the new environment. Because in the mother's womb it still floated almost germ-free in the amniotic fluid, while the outside world in which the child now lives is full of pathogens. On its way through the birth canal, the baby is supplied with a kind of protective bacterial coat. It is enveloped in its mother's vaginal mucus, which provides the founding population for this protective shell. The child to be born, which passes through the birth canal, can be clearly assigned to its mother on the basis of the bacteria. Because in the mouth, in the intestine, in the nose, and everywhere are the same microorganisms, which occur in the vaginal mucous membrane of the mother. In the case of offspring, however, girls or boys who are born by cesarean section, it is different because they are covered with skin bacteria that cannot be attributed to their mother, but only to the environment. And what can be said about the vaginal mucosa, lactic acid bacteria are found predominantly in this mucosa. These microbes are a very important factor in the intestinal flora and are also found on the skin, where they produce lactic acid and other metabolic products, which usually keep pathogens away. And the fact that newborns are covered with lactic acid bacteria during normal birth through the birth canal is a very important protective mechanism.
It is a specifically very valuable creational natural coincidence, I think, that in the vagina of the woman above all lactic acid bacteria occur. It is also the birth canal of all mammals, as your father Schwath explained to me back then. I was under 10 years old.
Which of course is correct and also known to me because my father taught you about this early on. However, because lactic acid bacteria occur in the vagina of the woman, as in all mammals, from which man also emerged as such, a high adaptation and selection pressure is exerted on the whole, whereby a good protection arises for the newborn small human being. Lactic acid basically corresponds to the founding population of microorganisms, which have a specific influence on which bacteria will later colonize the body. However, this founding population is missing in a child who is born by cesarean section. So the child, like later the adolescent and the adult, is much more sensitive in some respects than a normal natural-born child. A cesarean section child always has a higher risk of becoming infected with various resistant bacteria or of developing allergies, autoimmune diseases, etc. Also, it has much more frequent digestive problems than normal natural-born after come. What can also be explained is the fact that the bacteria in their community also have a strong influence on the odor of humans. And this is because it is not the skin itself, but the microbes living on it that produce the odor substances that smell pleasant or unpleasant, which refers both to the actual body odor and to perspiration. However, the state of consciousness also plays an important role here, because the higher the conscious capacity of consciousness and thus also the intelligence of the human being is developed, the more pleasant is the body odor, while elsewhere with weak development of consciousness and intelligence, an unpleasant to stinking body odor appears. Consequently, the smells produced by bacteria and by the state of consciousness and intelligence are very important for the mutual recognition and attractiveness of human beings. And the undeniable fact is that these smells also play a very important role in chemical communication between mother and child. Thus, depending on whether the offspring saw the light of day in the normal natural way or by cesarean section, the offspring will have different odors, which a mother realizes if she is able to mentally adjust to them, but which are often maternal disadvantages in non-emergency cesarean sections. Because the mother loses this ability through the artificial birth intervention, just like the newborn also loses part of its immature immune system. I don't think there's much more to explain.
Thank you very much for your detailed explanation. It is always valuable to me when you excuse me. The telephone rings.
You have to go, I hear.
Yes, Madeline called me because my sister Hetty and my brother-in-law Toto came to visit.
Then you must go, so I will do the same, but visit you again soon. Farewell and goodbye, Edward, dear friend.
Farewell too, dear friend. Goodbye, Ptaa.